The Printed Matter, exploring the power of voice through the weight of words. Close your eyes, press play, put on your headphones. Envision George, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes, lying on the hard, cold asphalt. Cheek pressed against the surface, walked all over. Anxious about space, comfort, his stuff no longer. All but his notebook clinging to his existence, beckoning to the time he was human before he was homeless. Envision George attempting to sleep, attempting to be, enveloped with newspaper, words literally acting as shelter. Hear his voice. Your lifelong dream recently relinquished. The tiresome fact remains that I cannot help search the masses, that I may chance upon a countenance pleasing to my soul. In the verdure of youth, the enticing notion of duality ignited within me the spark to unearth you, stirring from a dream to find you slumbering by my side. The idea of you was divine, something to look back upon on occasion when life has become antiquated, punctuated by the emergence of newly formed lovers holding our place in the universe. This project spawned from the image of a homeless man sleeping on the streets, sheltered by newspaper, and the idea of a dimension of newspaper I hadn't contemplated before, words as shelter. What is, after all, a newspaper column but a structural thing? A pile of words we build as a kind of warren, a burrow of beliefs we retreat to, entrenched. What I declare today might not match what I believe tomorrow, but we write on, regardless, as if words were capable of creating a lasting legacy, a cumulative weight of word upon word that fills in and plasters and supports our notion of self. How many of us shore up the cellar holes of identity with pillars of opinion, our words, as much as our clothes, making the man. So this made me think about our story of stuff, and especially as New Yorkers who constantly move, the idea that we wrap our valuables in newspaper to protect them. But when we see an individual wrapped in newspaper, we consider them decrepit. It made me question what we really value. Is it the human condition or the acquisition of fancy materials? This brought to light the concept called compassion fatigue, which is what my project is highlighting. It is this indifferent attitude society has developed toward the homeless, and this idea of the well-known philosophical question of the tree falling in the forest making a sound. I asked myself, does someone exist only when they are seen and heard? Through my research and observation phase of this project and volunteering in interviews, I was struck by a common thread of the success of writing workshops as a wanted creative pursuit within the homeless population. Picture the Homeless as a nonprofit that is dedicated to advocating and changing the conversation about what it means to live on the streets and in shelters. It's run by the homeless for the homeless. Prophet, a young, once homeless man, teaches their writing workshops. He argues that this conversation and changing it starts in one's own mind. A lot of folks, based on circumstances of their lives, never had access to their own minds and their own amazingness and their own beauty. They don't feel right to feel free. The biggest challenge is to get people to understand their own power and their own beauty. So how do we combine the concept of self and newspaper to leverage design? Despite the excess of words and information we are surrounded by in this world, I feel that homelessness is hushed, especially emotionally. Therefore, I want to create a space that allows homelessness to air their stories and souls, creating ownership of their existence. For my concept, I propose a production center for the oral and written histories of the working poor. Now, who is the working poor? The chronically homeless, which are the individuals that we see sleeping on the streets, actually only make up 15% of the homeless population. The working poor, my target market, make up 80%. They are defined as the individuals that work 27 weeks out of the year or more and are actively looking for work, but their income still falls below the poverty line. This group suffers from a set of obstacles, including finding and keeping jobs, saving money, and maintaining a sense of self-worth. I believe the best solution for this group is empowerment and employment. I propose to create a space that functions as a production center for the oral and written histories of the homeless, just like George's we heard before, and also a business center to search for employment. This space will function as a community motherboard of homeless voice, serving as a space to gain the skills to present oneself, both through therapeutic sharing of stories and practical employment skills, and to then share those gifts with the world. This space will be located at 355A Bowery, which is a one-floor, 1,500 square foot storefront in a neighborhood with a rich history of revival. The internal structure of my space will all be made out of newspaper and paper products, the idea being that as a dying art form, newspaper, there is currently a surplus of unwanted newspapers throughout New York, and that as the production of newspaper ebbs, so will homelessness. Throughout this project, I was increasingly interested in the cross between comfort, creativity, and health, and creating a space that promoted comfort without stasis. So I looked at several precedents that had both of these elements, including frequent flyer lounges at airports and healing rooms in hospitals. I also explored the different densities of newspaper in order to create a system within this space based on the weight of word and how I wanted that represented. So the three gradients and their respective transformations are light and gossamer, which I use shredded paper and tissue using for aesthetic cladding and insulation, medium density, which are tubes and paper pulp, which created the tables, chairs, and bar stools within the space, and heavy density. I used newspaper stacks and newspaper wood to create chairs and tables. Programmatically, the space was broken into 3 different areas, each represented by 3 different densities of newspaper, with the back space functioning as the business center and recording studio using newspaper wood, the heaviest density, both in its aesthetic and structure. The 3 areas include a reception and gallery space, a cafe which becomes a point of interaction between visitors and the working poor producing their stories, and a business center equipped with a recording booth meant to piggyback off the success of StoryCorps and Moth, which are 2 nonprofits that inspire individuals to share their stories, neither of which currently work with the homeless. Here are the digital images of the floor plan and sections in which I am trying to show the different densities and textures used throughout the space. I've created a space for the production of these stories, and I also wanted to create spaces for the consumption. I've sprinkled 5 installations around New York City for individuals to hear and experience the voice of someone that is homeless. I've placed them in areas of traffic that puncture the normal routine, hacking into the current environment. They become parasitic in nature, but not obstructive. They are temporary environments made out of newspaper and paper products exposed to the elements, meant to change with the weather. The premise being that the spoken word is ephemeral, and paper is only a bit more permanent, but weighty words do indeed last, echoing down the ages to transmit wisdom from one generation to the next. So through all these ideas swimming around in my head about homelessness and humanity, I came to the following conclusion. Perhaps there are no answers in life, just stories. Thank you.